and I think that it shows that we as a Congress are united in supporting employment and business opportunities for the men and women who have served in our military. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Ciccolini. Sorry.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of 2 amendments I'm offering in this block, both of which seek to ensure Pakistan demonstrates its commitment to counterterrorism operations and the dismantling of improvised explosive device networks. According to news reports, the majority of IEDs in Afghanistan share a common ingredient, calcium ammonium nitrate, which is illegal in Afghanistan but completely legal in Pakistan. When asked about what the Pentagon is doing to put pressure on Pakistan's distribution network of ammonium nitrate at his February Senate Armed Services Committee hearing, Secretary Panetta said, and I quote, "We've urged them, the Pakistanis, to take steps. In some cases they have. In some cases they wind up there too late. But we're continuing to impress upon them that they've got to be part of the answer to dealing with this issue," end quote. That's why I've offered Amendment 121, which would tie the funding of the Pakistan Counterinsurgency Fund to a certification requirement by the Secretary of Defense in consultation with the Secretary of State that Pakistan is making significant effort in implementing a strategy to counter improvised explosive devices, IEDs. Too many American soldiers have been killed or wounded as a result of IEDs. I'm also asking for a Second Amendment.
I'll yield the gentleman an additional 20 seconds.
Thank you. I'm also asking Amendment 118 in this block. This amendment would require that before providing reimbursement to Pakistan for its efforts in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, the Secretary of Defense must certify that Pakistan is taking demonstrable steps to support counterterrorism operations against terrorist organizations, dismantle IED networks, prevent the proliferation of nuclear-related materials, and issue visas in a timely manner for U.S. government personnel supporting counterterrorism efforts and assistance programs in Pakistan. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are common-sense amendments, and I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to my friend and colleague, the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Langford.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Horizon supports today of a simple way to be able to fix a problem that we've been trying to pursue for years on it. Despite a zero-tolerance policy, the Commission on Wartime Contracting released their final report last November highlighting contractors and subcontractors in Iraq and Afghanistan who have engaged in the practice of human trafficking. Despite numerous laws, numerous policies and attempts to do this, we have not been able to resolve this. Today, I'm putting forward an amendment to try to resolve this issue. According to various accounts before my committee, or before my subcommittee, third country nationals are hired by prime and subprime contractors holding U.S. government contracts. They're recruited by brokers who lure them into these positions under false pretenses. Many arrive having been robbed of wages, injured without compensation, subjected to sexual assaults, or held in deplorable conditions resembling indentured servitude by their subcontractor bosses. Using taxpayer dollars to support these conditions is immoral, inappropriate, and un-American. This is something we have worked to fix. This amendment brings clarity to the issues to make sure it's absolutely clear to these subcontractors that are often foreign companies bringing in laborers into work for our military that we never ever violate our basic American principle of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Richardson.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak in support of the Young-Richardson Amendment number 141 that we have before us. And I'd like to thank Chairman McKeon and also Ranking Member Smith and their staffs for all of their hard work on this very important bill. The Young-Richardson Amendment calls for the expedited completion of the study of the nation's strategic ports called for in the National Defense Authorization Act. As a representative of a district that serves the largest port complex in the nation, the 5th largest in the world, it is important that we always remember that in times of war, the role of ports is to protect our forts. This amendment directs the Department of Defense to provide a copy of the report to the GAO for additional review of the extent to which the facilities and infrastructure serving our strategic seaports meets the demands of the Department of Defense. The completion of this report is vital in its assessment of the structural integrity, the deficiencies, and most importantly, the report will identify potential funding sources to undertake these needed improvements. I thank the House Armed Services Committee for including this Young-Richardson amendment in block, and I also applaud Mr. Young on his
I yield the
long-standing
gentlelady an additional
leadership.
15 seconds.
Gentlelady is recognized for additional 30 seconds.
I'd like to thank the ranking member, Mr. Smith, and Chairman McKeon for including this amendment in block. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from California.
Reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Chair, we yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California.
Chairman, we yield back our time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendments en bloc offered by the gentleman from California. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The en bloc amendments are agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment number 59, printed in the House Report 112-485. For what purpose does the gentleman from Montana seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself 3 minutes.
Do you offer an amendment?
At the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 59, printed in House Report number 112-485, offered by Mr. Rehberg of Montana.
Pursuant to House Resolution 661, the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Rehberg, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Montana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself 3 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I have the honor to represent the city of Great Falls, home to Malmstrom Air Force Base and the 341st ICBM Missile Wing. The men and women stationed there are the best in the world. They understand the critical role they play in America's security. They also understand the vital role they have in the Great Falls community and the economy. Unfortunately, there are those that see their contributions as obsolete. They watched the Cold War end and failed to grasp at the insurmountable nuclear deterrent that is what is keeping peace that we so cherish. President Obama promised deep and reckless cuts to our nuclear arsenal. It's been reported that the National Security Council has developed a plan to cut our nuclear force by up to 80%, slashing it to a level not seen since the 1950s. To that end, the New START treaty with Russia will go down as one of the worst, most one-sided deals in our country's history. If two countries sign a nuclear arms reduction treaty, shouldn't both sides have to reduce their nuclear arms to meet agreed-upon targets? That's not what happened. The Russians, it turns out, were already well under the quota for nuclear weapons established by the treaty. So the first thing they did was increase their nuclear warheads to above the treaty limits. You heard that right. Russia increased the number of warheads that they had before reducing them. And as the United States unilaterally disarms the primary mission at Malmstrom in Great Falls is at risk. The administration refuses to reveal its reduction plans, but one proposal that has surfaced is to simply eliminate an entire wing of the ICBM missiles like the ones in Great Falls. The President promises that won't happen, just like he promised New START was a good deal. And some of the same senators who rubber-stamped the New START treaty are buying into those empty promises again. They assure that our nuclear triad is safe, and so is Malmstrom. I would think more skepticism is in order. Just a few weeks ago, President Obama was caught on an open mic promising the Russians that he would have more flexibility once he didn't need to worry about re-election. Given recent history and the New START treaty, it's hard to imagine how much worse it could get, but I'm not willing to wait around and find out. This amendment is simple. It says that the United States shouldn't be unilaterally disarming ourselves. I hope my colleagues join me in passing this amendment, which will help clean up the mess the President and the Senate got us into.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from the gentleman rise.
I claim the time in opposition.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask my colleagues to oppose this amendment. The amendment puts constraints that would recklessly weaken our national security by preventing nuclear reductions that the U.S. and Russia have already agreed to. The provision would de facto prevent any reduction and the number of nuclear delivery vehicles because Russia is already below the New START limits and does not need to make further reductions to comply with the treaty. Thus, it would essentially require Russia to build up its arsenal to allow the U.S. to implement its New START obligations. In other words, it would fully stop the implementation of a mutually agreed-upon treaty in its tracks. This is highly destabilizing. It would also risk terminating the treaty if the U.S. cannot comply with its obligations. Even during the Cold War, the U.S. negotiated with Russia to limit the number of nuclear weapons. Without New START, the U.S. would lose all verification rights, thereby losing insight into Russia's nuclear arsenal. These limitations would require the U.S. to maintain current numbers of nuclear delivery vehicles and placing artificial limits on our arsenal and make reductions subject to Russian actions, in effect outsourcing national security to Russia. Mr. Speaker, I would ask my colleagues to consider these facts when they consider voting on this amendment. I would ask my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Montana.
I yield the remaining time to Ms. Lummis of Wyoming.
The gentlelady is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank the gentleman from Montana for working with me on this amendment, which will prevent the United States from unilaterally disarming its nuclear arsenal. The brave men and women under the 90th Missile Wing in Cheyenne, Wyoming worked tirelessly in keeping our land-based nuclear missiles on nearly 100% alert. This work is tremendously important because the notion that the U.S., by unilaterally disarming itself, will somehow convince aggressors to follow suit is dangerous thinking. It is precisely this kind of thinking that seeped into the New START treaty. I'm still trying to determine what the U.S. got out of the deal. We all know what Russia got. Russia got to bind us to a cap on our nuclear arsenal. But Russia can still expand its strategic arsenal. Russia can stack their bombers to the hilt with warheads and call it a single delivery vehicle. Russia can deploy an unlimited number of the tactical nuclear weapons that are constantly pointed at our allies in Europe. Russia can develop new long-range nuclear-tipped cruise missiles. That's right, new nuclear platforms, including those capable of reaching the United States from the air and sea, don't count under the New START treaty. The only things that count under the New START treaty are the platforms on which the United States has a strategic advantage. New START is a terrible deal for the United States, a mess that we're trying to clean up with our amendment. If the United States keeps making bad deals like this, we risk losing the faith of our allies who rely on our nuclear umbrella. Those who have been content with our protection might think twice about whether it might be in their interests to have nuclear arms of their own. Nations who a few years ago would never imagine of being able to compete with the United States might start thinking about trying to compete with us. This is the reality. This is the danger of unilateral disarmament, and this is why you should vote for our amendment. I thank again the gentleman from Montana for working with us on this, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I have finally found the content of the secret agreement between the President and the Russians we keep hearing about. I want to read you what I've heard. My goal is the total elimination of nuclear weapons. If we can get these fellows, the Russians, back to the table and get them to start down that road of mutual reduction, then they might find out what common sense it would mean to eliminate them. These are the secret words that were said, but they weren't said by Barack Obama. They were said by Ronald Reagan in 1983. The careful elimination of nuclear weapons has been a bipartisan and wise goal of this country for 3 decades. We have the capability to destroy the world 24 times over. We are rationally and systematically negotiating with Russia to try to reduce the risk of accident, theft, or rogue state behavior while maintaining our sacred sovereign duty to defend ourselves at all times. This amendment interferes with that wise and bipartisan process. It sends this president or any president into negotiations with a set of preconceived notions which limit his or her ability to make the best deal on behalf of the United States, a deal which of course would have to be ratified by the United States Senate if it were to make material changes in the START agreement. From Reagan, through Bush, through Clinton, through George W. Bush, and now through President Obama, a wise, bipartisan plan to protect our country but reduce the risk of nuclear holocaust. This amendment stands in the way of that wise bipartisan tradition, and it should be defeated. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
On the other side, Mr. Speaker.
They have no time left.
With their time remaining, Mr. Speaker, I would just ask my colleagues to oppose this amendment. We'd ask our colleagues here in the House to oppose it, and I yield back my
Gentleman yields back. All time having expired, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Montana. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. This amendment, pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Montana will be postponed. It is now in order to consider amendment number 77, printed in House Report 112-485. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk, Mr. Chairman.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 77, printed in House Report number 112-485, offered by Mr. Hunter of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 661, the gentleman from California, Mr. Hunter, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The war in Iraq has come to a close, and while the Iraq mission is over, countless examples of combat heroism performed by our military over nearly a decade of operations are both an inspiration and a reminder of the service and sacrifice of so many Marines, sailors, soldiers, and airmen. For Iraq, there have been hundreds of Silver Stars awarded. There have been 21 Navy Crosses and 15 Distinguished Service Crosses. The nation's highest award for combat valor, the Medal of Honor, was presented on only 4 occasions. Each was awarded posthumously, 3 for action that involved smothering a grenade to save others. One Marine, Sergeant Rafael Peralta, who posthumously nominated for the Medal of Honor, deserves to be part of this distinguished group of heroes, but he's not. He was denied that honor when his nomination was wrongly downgraded to the Navy Cross. The incident leading to the nomination occurred in 2004 during combat in Fallujah, Iraq. He and several Marines entered a room and came into immediate contact with the enemy. A firefight erupted and Peralta was hit in the back of the head with a fragment of a ricocheted bullet. While Peralta was on the floor, a grenade was thrown and landed within his reach. He scooped up the grenade and pulled it into his body, saving the lives of his fellow Marines. 7 Marines confirmed his actions. So did the medical evidence. And the Marine Corps, after conducting its own review, nominated Peralta for the Medal of Honor. The Navy agreed with the Marine Corps and sent the nomination to the former Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates. That's where the nomination was downgraded 4 years after Peralta's death. Secretary Gates came to this conclusion after taking the unprecedented step of forming a scientific panel to review the evidence. Contrary to the eyewitness accounts, the evidence submitted, and the recommendation of the Marine Corps and the Navy, Secretary Gates determined Peralta could not have consciously pulled the grenade to his body. And if he did, it was involuntary, according to Secretary Gates. His judgment also concluded that this grenade detonated 1 to 3 feet from Peralta's left knee, not underneath his body. Yet the Navy Cross citation reads and exactly parallels the Medal of Honor citation, quote, "Without hesitation and with complete disregard for his own personal safety, Sergeant Peralta reached out and pulled the grenade to his body, absorbing the brunt of the blast and shielding his fellow Marines only feet away," end quote. That's an indisputable statement. And the Navy Cross citation was awarded. According to this citation, Peralta did exactly what Secretary Gates said he didn't or couldn't have done. Now, more than 8 years after Peralta's death, new evidence currently under review by the Navy and found by my office and by Joe Casper on my staff in particular, along with the History Channel, found evidence that the Navy never even saw. We gave this evidence to the Navy, and it validates the eyewitness accounts that has led to the Medal of Honor nomination. I submit this evidence for the record. I also have a report from a renowned forensic pathologist, which I am submitting for the record. The report, which accounts for the condition of the body armor, autopsy findings, and the pathologist's own experience with head wounds, concludes Peralta was not immediately incapacitated by the brain injury and, in fact, reached for the grenade and pulled it under his body. I have seen this video evidence. Earlier this year, the Navy took a major step in recognizing Sergeant Peralta and named a destroyer in his honor, a great honor. The Navy and Secretary Ray Mabus in particular deserve to be commended for their decision, as well as their commitment to honoring Sergeant Peralta's sacrifice. The new evidence was submitted to the Navy months ago, and I did receive confirmation from Secretary Mabus that the evidence is being reviewed in the hope of resubmitting the Medal of Honor nomination. And based on the evidence, I'm confident in the Navy's ability to make the right decision. But even so, this process doesn't stop with the Navy. Resubmitting the nomination will still require the approval of the Secretary of Defense. And knowing the extent of the information before the Navy, prompting its initial decision and any subsequent decision will be valuable to ensuring the error in judgment that denied Peralta the Medal of Honor is corrected once and for all. I know that I speak for my colleagues in saying we look forward to the Navy's decision, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves, and the gentleman's request is covered under general leave. Gentleman from Washington, for what purpose do you rise?
Though I am not opposed, I ask unanimous consent to claim the time in opposition.
Without objection, the gentleman controls 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I yield back. Balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California. Gentleman from California yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 111, printed in House Report 112-485. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
I have an amendment in order, Mr. Chairman, made in order under the rule.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 111, printed in House Report number 112-485, offered by Mr. Price of Georgia.
Pursuant to House Resolution 661, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Price, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, for over 60 years, the United States and Israel have forged a very unique relationship, a friendship built upon trust and shared sacrifice and common values. But our relations with Israel, as with a growing number of long-held alliances, seem to be negotiable with this administration. A stream of highly sensitive information continues to be leaked to the press. Information that includes U.S. and Israeli military and intelligence operational capabilities, as well as classified negotiations between Israel and other countries. On March 20th, the New York Times, citing senior administration officials, reported the conclusions of a classified war simulation conducted by the United States that analyzed an Israeli attack on Iranian nuclear facilities. On March 28th, Foreign Policy magazine, quoting 4 senior diplomats and military intelligence officers, referred to a report that Israel would be granted access to air bases in Azerbaijan as part of an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, a move clearly designed to undercut cooperation between Azerbaijan and Israel. Further degrading Israel's ability to defend itself, the Washington Post's David Ignatius on February 3rd reported that Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta believes there's a strong likelihood that Israel will strike Iran in April, May, or June, which reportedly sent Iran's air defenses immediately on high alert. The release of this classified information not only puts at risk fragile negotiations between countries, but also the very lives of the men and women called upon to carry out this mission. I recently traveled to the Middle East where we met with senior Israeli officials. Their number one concern was that for the first time in our long relationship, the United States was releasing classified operational information and capabilities, willfully putting at risk the lives of Israeli people. Mr. Chairman, our actions are not the actions of a friend or an ally. A couple of weeks ago, I joined with 22 other members of the House of Representatives and sent a letter to President Obama calling for an investigation into these leaks by senior administration and intelligence officials. We have yet to receive a response. Now, it's no secret that this administration is seeking to dissuade Israel from launching an airstrike on Iranian nuclear facilities. But risking Israeli and American lives and undermining our alliance is unacceptable. The Israeli people should not have to question our support for their security. So I offer this amendment with Representative Pat Meehan and Representative Randy Hultgren. Our amendment calls for the Attorney General to investigate these leaks and bring those responsible to justice. Trust and cooperation are vital to securing a strong alliance and a future of peace. The persons responsible for this breach of faith should be held accountable. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves for what purpose? Gentleman from Washington seek recognition.
Though I'm not opposed to the amendment, I ask unanimous consent to claim the time in opposition.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Speaker. I too support the amendment, and with that I will yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Georgia.
Urge adoption of the amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, on that I request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment 119, printed in House Report 112-485. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
I have an amendment to the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 119, printed in House Report number 112-485, offered by Mr. Flake of Arizona.
Pursuant to House Resolution 661, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Flake, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
I thank the chair. In 2009, the Pakistan Contingency Fund was established in order to help Pakistan build its counterinsurgency capabilities. The bill before us authorizes the Pakistan Counterinsurgency Fund through the year 2013 and contains a special oversight requirement which conditions the use of more than 10% of any money appropriated to the fund until the Secretaries of Defense and State submit an updated report reflecting current conditions in Pakistan to Congress. That report will include details on how much money is to be used, metrics for success, a description of Pakistan's efforts to combat terrorist organizations inside the country, and it will have vigorous oversight provisions. I commend the Committee on Armed Services for continuing to do this important oversight. But the way the law is written, access to 100% of the funds appropriated for the Pakistan Counterinsurgency Fund will be granted as soon as the report is submitted, leaving no time for Congress to actually review the report before these funds are obligated. I'm concerned that this report will simply be submitted to Congress and it will be perfunctory in nature. The report is issued and boom, the funds are gone before Congress has a chance to actually look at it. This amendment would simply add a requirement that once the Secretaries of Defense and State submit the report, a period of 30 days has to elapse before the money can be fully utilized. The 30-day period will give Congress time to actually review the report, and more importantly, it will give us the option to prevent the expenditure of funds if necessary. This last year has shown the tumultuous relationship that we have with Pakistan, particularly it's been more strained since the killing of Osama bin Laden in Pakistan just over a year ago. Congress needs this flexibility to better manage the flow of U.S. taxpayer dollars to a country whose support of the U.S. has been anything but consistent. This amendment simply gives Congress that flexibility. I urge adoption and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose is the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Though I'm not opposed to the amendment, I ask unanimous consent to claim the time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I will just say that I think the gentleman raises excellent points, and I urge the body to support the amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arizona.
I urge adoption of the amendment and yield back.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It's now in order to consider amendment number 133, printed in House Report 112-485. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask to speak and offer an amendment.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 133, printed in House Report number 112-485, offered by Mr. Murphy of Pennsylvania.
Pursuant to House Resolution 661, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Murphy, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment, Mr. Chairman, and note that we all share the highest respect and admiration for all our military from all branches. But the Air Force proposal to retire more than 200 aircraft and eliminate 9,100 positions impacts 149 U.S. installations, but only one of these base faces cuts so severe it would be closed, and that's the 9/11th Air Reserve Station in Pittsburgh. If the 9/11th was inefficient, not cost-effective, or served no unique strategic purpose, I would support the Air Force decision wholeheartedly. But I'm afraid the attempt to close the 9/11th was misguided, mistaken, and misinformed. That's why I submitted an amendment along with Representatives Doyle, Critz, and Altmaier to ensure Congress has the ability to review Pentagon decisions and enforce cost and strategic accountability on force reductions. I'm grateful Mr. Young of Alaska worked to combine our amendment with his, and that is adopted in en bloc number 6. But first I want to say a few words about why this effort was so critical, not just to 9/11th Airlift Wing, but the entire country. The decision to close the 9/11th is the present-day tale of the $400 hammer and the $200 toilet seat. When you don't do proper due diligence, haste makes waste. As my community has witnessed with the Air Force's attempt to close the 9/11th, the Pentagon is using a loophole to outflank Congress and ignore the intent of the statutes. The Pennsylvania congressional delegation repeatedly sought information about the decision to close our base, but we never received accurate and detailed information about the Air Force's justifications. As the home of 7 C-130 Hercules transport planes, the 1,100-plus reservists of the 9/11th provide critical mission support for global military logistical operations with an active tempo in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Air Force did not perform a base-by-base cost comparison of 9/11th. Instead, against other reserve and guard stations housing C-130s. Instead, it did a plane-by-plane cost comparison comparing the oldest models with the newer ones. Unfortunately, the 9/11th now has the oldest models of C-130s because the Air Force recently swapped out the newer ones for active-duty operations in Afghanistan. With 4 10,000-foot runways, a control tower, fire safety and security support provided virtually no cost to the Air Force, the 9/11th is indeed cost-effective, while other bases cost hundreds of millions of dollars over 10 years for similar and even less services. Since 1976, Congress has insisted on having a voice in Pentagon decisions to close or substantially reduce civilian personnel and military bases. 2 statutes have been enacted to prevent base closures from occurring without congressional review. Our crucial amendment prevents the Pentagon from moving forward on a backdoor brack in violation of congressional intent to review those decisions and ensure base closure attempts are both in the best interest of the taxpayers and our national defense. And it protects the jurisdiction of the House and Senate Committees on Armed Services by requiring force reduction proposals be submitted as part of the President's budget request. This gives Congress 2 opportunities to review and reverse base closures if they are not in national strategic interest, both through the annual defense authorization and appropriations bills. Our language protects Congress' ability to review force structure changes and requires the Pentagon to complete thorough and accurate analysis before moving forward. But through the support of Chairman McKeon, Mr. Forbes, of Virginia, Ranking Member Smith, as well as the leadership of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee who have worked with us on this issue, the underlying legislation prevents the Air Force from making any aircraft retirements or transfers in the next fiscal year. With the NDAA and defense appropriations bills, Congress will now have the opportunity to vote on legislation to save the 9/11th Airlift Wing for the upcoming year, stop the Air Force from making any decision on massive Guard and Reserve cuts that are, and even if both of these bills were enacted, this amendment is still needed, because without it, the executive branch can close any Guard or Reserve base without giving Congress a chance to review the decision. On behalf of the 1,100+ military families at the 9/11th, I ask unanimous consent then to withdraw my amendment, since the Young-Murphy amendment has already been adopted.
Without objection.
Thank you.
The amendment is withdrawn. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 59 by Mr. Rehberg of Montana. Amendment number 111 by Mr. Price of Georgia. The Chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic vote after the first vote in the series. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on Amendment number 59, printed in the House Report 112-485 by the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Rehberg, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 59, printed in House Report number 112-485, offered by Mr. Rehberg of Montana.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
The House back to amendment votes on the Defense Authorization Bill for fiscal year 2013. They began the day today at 9 o'clock Eastern and went almost immediately to votes. Again, 142 amendments have been considered or will be considered at the end of the day by the House. This is the third day of debate on the legislation. This is an amendment by Denny Rehberg which would ban any reductions to the strategic nuclear triad unless the Secretary of Defense provides specific certification. This is a 15-minute vote. The 2013 Defense Programs Bill authorizes $643 billion for defense programs in the next fiscal year, $3.6 billion more than the administration had requested. They began debate on Wednesday with general debate and started amendment debate yesterday. A Capitol Hill reporter brings us up to speed on what's been done so far. The House is making quick work of over 140 amendments to the Defense Authorization Bill. Kevin Barron with the National Journal joins us. What have they gotten done so far late yesterday and so far today?
Late yesterday, they were debating until around 1:30 in the morning. Just debates, lots of debates, and they held all the big votes, or most of the big votes, for this morning. This morning, the first vote was the one that most people were watching on an amendment that would ease the treatment of some terrorism detainees. Democrats have been trying to reverse some language in last year's authorization bill so that they would prevent the indefinite detention and military custody of anyone arrested on U.S. soil. And that failed, despite the hopes of the Democrats.
What are some of the issues left to be addressed in amendments today?
I'm not sure, honestly. They've been blazing through them, and we're at the bottom of the list. There's been some interesting ones, ranging from pulling troops out of Europe well, I'm not even sure where they are at the process. They move so fast.
You specifically wrote this morning about the Conyers-Ellison amendment. You wrote in National Journal dealing with the F-35. Have they resolved that issue?
Yes, that amendment was shot down on voice vote yesterday, which was an interesting one. It was one of the more extreme ones because it just completely canceled the program for the Marines version of the F-35, the version that does short takeoff vertical landing, which is the #1 item that the Marines want right now. So that was it was an out there amendment. The story was more about the lobbying on the amendment and using some Marine Corps documents. Lockheed, who makes the plane, was using Marine Corps documents to lobby them.
At the end of the day here in the House, do you expect the bill will pass on a bipartisan basis as it did in the House Armed Services Committee?
I'm not so sure. I think the bill definitely will pass, but my sense is the Democrats have pretty much gotten steamrolled here today and yesterday. Things from the detainee amendment, their amendment that they were hoping for on speeding up the exit from Afghanistan wasn't allowed on the floor. Bit by bit, a lot of amendments on missile defense, on Law of the Seas Treaty. Republicans are winning, Democrats are losing.
The House will be done with it today, but what's ahead in the Senate?
Next week, the Senate begins markup of its version of the bill, so all the subcommittees meet. But it's a little different. The House had 3 days of open hearings, which were mostly just members reading their quick statements, but a nice full open markup on the committee of everything on the bill. Senate is in closed session for all of it. 3 days of closed session, secret sessions, which they've been criticized for years past. They think that they can just get things done a lot faster that way.
Kevin Barron with National Journal joining us for a midday update on the Defense Authorization Bill. Thanks for that reporting. And that amendment that Kevin Barron mentioned, the Adam Smith amendment, that failed. That was the first amendment vote of the day. Back here live on the House floor, a couple of amendment votes should be wrapping things up here. This is the Denny Rehberg amendment, which would ban any reduction to the strategic nuclear triad unless the Secretary of Defense certified a couple of things: that further reductions in the Russia arsenal are needed for compliance with the START treaty, and that Russia is not developing or deploying a nuclear delivery system. This is a 15-minute vote. One more amendment vote will follow this, and we expect a Democratic motion to recommit as well.
Yeas are 238, the nays are 162. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 111, printed in House Report 112-485 by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Price, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the yeas prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 111, printed in House Report number 112-485, offered by Mr. Price of Georgia.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this is a 2-minute vote.
And it's likely the last amendment vote to the Defense Authorization Bill. Tom Price's amendment would require the Justice Department to order an investigation into the possible violation of U.S. law regarding numerous leaks of sensitive information involving U.S. and Israeli military intelligence and operational capabilities. 2-minute vote, and we expect a Democratic motion to recommit before final passage.